Oh no, my phone rang. Oh,
who's calling?
I don't know. Hold on.
Does it work?
Hello, this is Josh. Hello, this is Josh. How can I help you?
You're interrupting the Lord Ump.
I'm good, but you can go ahead and lose this number. Thank you. Bye.
Oh shit! Get fucked, telemarketers! You little bitch ass punks. Who was that?
It was a telemarketer.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Thanks for. I should turn my volume down on my phone so more telemarketers don't interrupt.
First of all, what was that song?
That's the default on my Android phone. That's what.
Okay.
That's what comes out of it. Okay, it shouldn't make any
Second
more
of
noises.
all, you should have advertised the Lord Ump. We could have had another listener.
Oh my god, this guy would be like, "Hey, I'm from this solar panel company, and we'd like you to support solar panels." I'd be like, "I'd love to, but could you support Lord Dump? I need you to go to."
Have you heard the good news?
I need you, sir, to send emails with questions about Dungeons and Dragons to lorddumpquestions@gmail.com.
Look at that flawless entry.
Or tweet it to us on Twitter.
You know what that means?
What's that? What?
I now have to keep that whole thing where your phone went off in the show to have this make sense. That's what you've done to yourself. That whole thing that I was going to put right at the end, I'm going to leave it right in the middle.
That's an integral part of what we do. Well, I could have also asked the telemarketer to kindly join Twitter and send the questions to us at the Lord Dump on Instagram or Twitter as well. I should have done that.
You know, you could have done that.
But I didn't. I committed to the bit, and now it's here forever, stuck.
Well, you know, this is a very special occasion where, you know, on Lord Dump, we build the world before your very ears. And to him, it would have just been you sort of advertising a world next to his very ears, if that makes any sense.
Yes. I'm going to say yes.
Just say yes. Improv.
You should see my face.
I do.
The listeners, Sean, remember they're involved in this too. There's people listening to us.
Who's that?
Our wonderful listeners who listen to us at Spotify and on RSS.com and all other wonderful podcast mediums.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if they're hearing this, they're definitely on one of those. So thank you. I appreciate it.
We love you all. This has been a very slippery, chaotic start to an episode, which means it's going to be a slippery, chaotic episode, right?
We'll see how much of this actually makes it in.
A lot of this may get cut. That makes sense.
It might just be theme song, phone call. That's it. We end the episode there.
The episode over. That's no more.
Yeah.
You don't need to hear anything else. Do you know what we're talking about today, Sean?
I believe I do.
Oh?
Telemarketers. Our world needs them. Every world needs them. But where do they fit in?
I'm just envisioning a world where somebody has like message or sending readily available to advertise to you. And so every now and again you get a random message or sending spell in your head trying to get you to come buy something.
A wealthy businessman has a factory full of wizards who create casting or sending scrolls that they then ship out to multiple people to advertise their wares in people's heads.
It's perfect.
I believe that was an episode of Doctor Who.
Well, now it's an episode of Lore Dump that has to be written.
All right. Well, now that we've gotten that out of the way, what are we actually talking about?
So,
because I've forgotten.
I mean, I really like the direction we were headed with that. But what we're actually talking about today, Sean, is seasons, the calendar, and possibly some holidays.
Ooh. Little Kringle Mass.
Little Kringle Mass.
All Hallows Ween.
That's right. All of these things. It's getting into that, like, at least for the West, that very like holiday focused season. Canada had Thanksgiving the other day. America's Thanksgiving is coming up soon. We got Halloween.
It's not a race, Canada. Calm down.
They've got the fastest Halloween in the West.
They've got
America
a pretty early Thanksgiving. I don't like I couldn't really eat a turkey right now. I'm gonna wait. So
you could eat one right now.
Teach their own. No, I couldn't.
There's a specific window of the year where you can consume turkey, Shannon. Is that what you're saying?
I only eat turkey on one specific day. The rest of the year tastes like ass.
July 4th.
Because it's turkey.
You're talking about July 4th.
Yeah. I only have a July 4th. That's why my Thanksgivings always suck.
July 4th turkey. That's you hear to hear. It's the best time to have a turkey.
The Turk of July. That's what I call it.
That's commonly used.
I'm just going to sit here until the curse corrects itself, because I'm not going to help.
Okay, well, here we go. It is. Yes, we're talking about seasons, calendars, and maybe some holidays. So we want to kind of like get those things, what does seasons look like on our planet? And we always start with the disclaimer that some places might have slightly different calendars and seasons, right? Like if you're further north or higher in altitude, the seasons may look a little different. The winter may be longer, the summer may be shorter, vice versa. Like those sorts of things exist, but what are the basic seasons and kind of what do they look like a whole? And also excluding magical implications surrounding seasons, because like we said, we got dragons that cause storms and stuff like that, and those aren't really particularly relevant to the actual season. So we're just going to establish the actual seasons, the actual calendar, and some holidays to go around it.
I want to start off the bat with the crazy idea that I just sort of had while you were filling time for us to think about things.
Okay.
And describing what we're doing to our audience. What if, and bear with me on this because it's a fresh idea. It's just, oh, look, it's just being born.
Oh, look at that baby idea. Wow, it's so cute.
What does it have to say for itself, idea? What if, instead of this, because you know how the world, we have like different seasonal, like it's summer on the other side of the world when it's winter here.
Sure.
Right? That sort of shit.
Yeah.
What if it was globally the same season? Because we have magic.
Because fuck you, science.
Because fuck all this realism in science. That's bullshit. It's
it.
winter everywhere all at once.
Okay, so planet-wide winter.
Planet-wide spring, planet-wide summer, planet-wide...
Because like there isn't
fall.
There isn't orbits. We've kind of like toyed with this a little bit. There aren't orbits like there are. An orbit is really what defines our seasons.
Yes.
Our planet is hurtling through the void with things clinging to it, including an incubator sun and some moons that have kind of been torn off of it or surrounding surrounding planetoids. So like like it's not an orbit in the traditional sense. Like it's very different. So maybe everything's rotating pretty much at the same speed a little bit.
So it's So what I'm envisioning is the sun. It's not really alive, but it's got one job, and that's to keep the egg either warm or cold depending on what it needs. So what if it like moves further and closer depending on what the egg needs currently?
I like that.
And every like couple of months it moves away, and then it gets colder, and then you have winter when it's at its zenith.
Yeah.
Then it comes back towards the egg, and you have summer.
So it's really
closer.
It's the planet's still rotating for day-night cycle, but the temperature is managed by the distance of the sun based on just an in and out pull. I love that. That's so good. That's genius, Sean.
Yeah,
You're a
I
genius.
did it.
That's
now
so
everyone
good.
gets Christmas when it's cold
all the time. I also really like the implications of if the sun determines that the egg needs an extended period of cold, we are talking about an ice age, and you can play with that as a dungeon master. Like the sun has elected essentially in its limited capacity for cognition to pull away for an extended period. That's so good.
I like it.
Lots of potential there. Okay, so there you go. And the seasons are winter, spring, summer, fall.
Yep, just like Iroh's saying.
Okay.
You ever watch Last Airbender?
No, I still haven't.
Oh,
every time you ask me.
All right.
I've watched
bits. Audience, you have my permission to stop listening to the podcast. We've been canceled. Sorry, guys. Josh has to go do his homework. We'll be back after a short hiatus where he watches Avatar: The Last Airbender.
I have to go binge the whole thing.
I'm kidding.
I'm sorry.
It's a good show. You should watch it.
I'm a bad friend for what I've done here. It's true.
There's a very, well, to me, there's a very memorable song that Iroh sings about the Four Seasons.
Can you sing it for us?
Nope. So we have the Four Seasons set up and how they function. How do you want to get started on the actual calendar? What's the calendar looking like? We got 10 days in this bitch, like Faerun. We got 4-day weeks and then like a 5-day weekend.
It's not a really difficult place to live, so there's just a long weekend. There's only a few days you have to work.
Yeah.
So a lot of like days of the week and year cycles a lot of the time are like predetermined by the cultures on the planet. So like, did the elves establish this calendar, or was this something established by the gods, or did the elves not give a shit because they just siphoned magic, and then as other things began to exist on the planet, they started tracking days of the week and things like that?
Are there going to be different calendars, or are we going to primarily use one?
Well, I think there's one, because we don't need to complicate it. Like, it doesn't need to be dumb.
But what about Tiefling New Year?
We could still have you could still have specific holidays to cultures without, like, it's like, but most of the world has adopted the 7-day week, but we still have Chinese New Year as opposed to.
Yeah, which is better because they have animals attached to it.
So that sort of thing, like, we can still do that, but I don't think we need to kill it with like different days of the week for different weeks and stuff like that for different cultures. Here's what I'm thinking. The elves came down, they knew the seasons and maybe named the seasons because they were dealing with the sun coming in and out, and so they recognized those seasons, but not a lot else mattered in regards to time. They were very long-lived. And they
just got colder and then warmer and then colder and then warmer.
So
there weren't like trees to die. There wasn't like snowfall, really.
And for a long time, they stuck with that, even after things began to change, because they knew it, and it wasn't really that important.
Yeah.
But as some of the shorter-lived races began to manifest on the planet, and it became important for them to manage cycles of time, then some sort of calendar was created, right? Maybe it was the orcs that made the calendar.
Ooh, that'd be very interesting.
They came trundling
Orcish
through.
Culture.
Yeah, orcish culture-based calendar.
Yeah.
Something like that. It doesn't have to be the orcs. I'm just spitballing things.
No, I know. I know. So elves existed. They noticed just like things sort of happened. It got colder and then it got warmer. But then nature appeared.
Yeah.
That made it drastically more obvious that things were changing on a grander scale.
The plants,
trees would lose all their leaves. It would become like snow. Rain would turn into snow at a certain point of the year.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, so I feel like the elves having a calendar, because elves kind of suck. So we mentioned it I mentioned it in a lot of episodes. That elves just kind of exist and they don't really have the same concept of time as everyone else.
Yeah.
So theirs is out because theirs would be so far out of touch from everyone else that it wouldn't matter.
It's just seasonal. They're like, okay, when the seasons started happening and impacting them, they're like, okay, well, we have a seasonal calendar.
Seasons for them are like months, I would assume.
And those seasons correlate with the Feywild, which they began to get some concepts of when the High Elves began to break into the other planes, like the Feywild. And they're like, oh, hey, this is just like the summer plane of the Fey.
Yeah.
Right? This is just like the frost plane. Blah, 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 blah. Like,
I like it.
Oh, cool. So it's based off of like those cycles. But then some of the more short-lived groups showed up and were like, hey, we need like a little bit better way of tracking time, like a little more nuanced. It fits our mortality.
What if it was refined over time? Because the elves, showed up. They lived for a very long time. They had something on paper. It was like, these are the seasons. This is how it goes, blah, blah, blah. And then, eventually one of us will die.
Yeah.
But the dwarves said, well, we don't live as long. So let's take what they've already got. Let's make it more accurate to us. Let's add, cycles of the sun because we're more likely to notice those. We're more practical. They sort of refined a lot, not all of it, but like a lot of the actual detail of like months, maybe even to the point of maybe having weeks. But I think the final calendar that is used was developed by humans.
Just humans?
Yes. At least that's my theory.
That works. Makes sense to me. So the humans adopted the dwarven calendar.
They adopted and
refined it, right. So that makes sense. What's the catalyst for the humans? The dwarves, it makes sense that they took the elven calendar because they were essentially subjugated to the elves for a considerable period of time. What's the catalyst for the humans picking up the dwarven calendar?
So I think that because while dwarves don't live as long as elves, they still live much longer than humans, so their calendar would still be a little, things come, things go. This is about how many weeks we have. But the humans are like, they live a tenth as long as some of these other creatures. So they're like, we need everything tracked. We need days. We need like hours, minutes. We need time. Like they came in and essentially made time a thing. Like there are this many hours in the day. There are this many days in a week. There's this many weeks in a month. Right. And then they sort of tracked the actual.
So that's the refining. But what's the? Yes. What was it? Was it what brought the humans in contact with the dwarven calendar? It was already globally prolific? Was it trade with the dwarves? What made that?
I think it was the dwarves calendar. The dwarven calendar was the one they used primarily at that time. But as humans begin to like grow in population and number, and in like they were in what's it called? They were in the foremost. Ingenuity. What do you call that?
Invention? Adaptation?
No. Trying to find the right word. Innovative.
Oh, innovation.
They were like the innovators because they lived so short and did so much with their lives that it was hard to keep up with them unless you got on their schedule, and they refined that calendar from the dwarvens to match what they needed it to be, so that everyone was like, okay, well, if we want to deal with the humans, we have to adopt their calendar.
Okay, so this all makes sense. So you're saying then the human calendar got widespread out to everybody because it became prolific. So that all makes sense. Like the refining all makes sense. I'm trying to understand. Humans and the dwarves are two disparate groups from each other. They came in contact with each other in order for the humans to adopt and then refine the dwarven calendar. Yeah. What was that? That's my big question for you. Was it like, again, like just slowly over time, them intermingling with each other through trade and things like that? The humans didn't really have a calendar up until then. And then as they began to develop, they picked up the dwarven and refined it. And then it got more widely spread out to other groups. Is that what we're thinking?
Yes. Okay. That's what it is.
Cool. That's awesome. I love it.
Nice.
I love it.
Perfect.
Boom. So then we have this human calendar is the calendar the planet has settled on. And it is 3 months a season. It is...
That makes sense.
Yeah. The dwarves were like, there's 3 months in a season.
Yes.
And the humans were like, cool. How about we do some weeks?
Pretty precise. Yeah. Because it's, less scientifical, more like, on a regular cycle. Than it is like, oh, well, the sun is on its way back out. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it is more like time specific, as opposed to somewhere around September, it starts getting a little colder.
Right.
It's more like you can begin to see the sun getting smaller in the sky.
Oh, and you could do like totally tracking time just by sun distance and stuff too. That's cool. Yeah. Maybe there are these crazy versions of chronometers that are just distant measurers for the sun to the planet. Like that would be really neat.
There's like these. I'm almost envisioning like something that looks like a telescope, but there's no glass in it. Yeah. And it's just set there that every day when the sun passes, you measure how much smaller it's gotten.
Yeah. It's like a weird sextant, essentially.
Pretty much. Yeah.
That's cool. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So the humans were like, okay, we've got these months, and they're very well tuned by the dwarves. The dwarves, are pretty meticulous in regards to that. And then the humans are like, well, let's break this down further. Let's, days have always been a thing because the day-night cycle always existed still.
Yes.
But let's group these days together. How many days are there in a month? Oh, there's like 30. Okay.
Yeah.
How do we break those 30 days into even more even increments of time?
10.
10? And we have 3 weeks. We have 3 weeks.
No, there's 3 days in a week. There's 10 weeks.
10 weeks, 3 days in a week.
I don't want to do that to the DM.
No. I like
there's
the
10
inverse.
Weeks you have to name.
I like that there's 3 weeks in a month and each week is 10 days.
So you like the Faerun rules?
Yeah. I mean, it is a good count. It's easy to
a 10 day sounds better than a week. I like that.
Yeah. It's so much easier to mathematically be like, okay,
Yeah.
You've literally got, I mean, what is that? So there's 30 days in a month and there's 12 months, so whatever. Like it's
There's 300 days in a year?
Yeah.
No, there's 12 months.
360
There's
days?
360 days in a year.
Exactly.
Yeah, perfect.
Like it's a very easy breakdown.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So we've got 12 months in a year, 3 weeks in a month, and 10 days in a week.
Mm-hmm.
Easy peasy. What do those days look like? What are they called?
Damn it. I was going to ask you that, and then you were going to have to come up with all the names.
Let's split the labor.
1 day, ton day, thun day, 4th day, 5th day, size day, ses day.
This is where
day.
Okay, so it's just literally in numerics essentially.
Sure,
So
that's what I'm doing.
One
I don't know
day,
if you want to change it.
Twun day, wood day, thud day.
No, 1 day, ton day, thun day.
Oh, because 3, right? Duh.
Yeah, 3, and then fun day.
Okay, I got it. Okay, that's perfect. We'll have to write those out later to remember those.
Yeah, it's essentially 1 through 10, but said weird.
Yeah, it's with
day at the end.
I love it. It's perfect.
It's easy.
And it's based on like early elven perspectives of time, like are suffused throughout all of this. And the elves are very much like, the gods are irrelevant. So there's no like god or deity component to this.
It's over time it's been removed from like celestial and divine bodies, and it's just like, this is how we calculate what day it is here.
Yeah, it's just slowly formed off of that over whatever 10,000 years we've decided it's been, I think. A little bit more.
Yes.
Yeah, that's perfect. Okay, I love it. We have our calendar. We have our seasons.
We have our seasons, our calendar.
You know what that means? Holidays.
Birthdays? Oh.
Also birthdays, sure.
Birthdays are just birthdays, or whatever you want to call them, Because what I came up with for Conundrum Company is that Morton's tribe doesn't celebrate birthdays. They celebrate harvests.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're alive, you don't celebrate your birth until your first harvest. That's when you're technically considered born.
Alive. Interesting.
Yeah. And then you count the number of harvests you survived to count how old you are.
Do you want to do that in this world?
No.
Do you want to take Morton's legacy over? Or okay.
I don't think so. That wouldn't make sense for the elves to start that too.
That's true. And that's probably a cultural thing, like you did with Morton. It's like, well, what's relevant?
That's why I don't think we should put that in the world, because I feel like it should be very specific to the culture.
That's valid. So we've got our 10 days of the week.
Mm-hmm.
4 seasons, 3 months per season. I'm writing this all down.
I think there should be a 10-day long holiday.
Okay.
Sort of in the middle of... What if that's our Christmas? Is the last 10 day of the year.
The last 10 day of the year.
Yeah, it goes from
Can
one day.
Can our weeks be called 10 days?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I'm not joking. That's literally what they call them in the Sword Coast.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. So the last 10 day of the year is from whatever that one day to the last day, the 10th day.
Yeah.
That whole week is just celebrating. Like, everything shuts down. Everyone is just partying for 10 days straight. Celebrating feasts, parties, drinking, games.
Could we have it as the concept is calling the sun back? Because the sun leaves and comes back. So this is like an ushering back. Like, please, if you don't have this celebration, the sun might just keep going. Like, I know that's not really how it works, but
it's adopted from those original pagan rituals to be like, let's call the sun back. It's leaving.
Yeah, it's time to let the sun come back to us. And it's all about like setting out greeting and like having these big festivals and feasts in the middle of the coldest time of the year to call the sun back to them.
creating a warm, hospitable environment to return to. So it's also not just for like, oh, let's call back the sun, but also returning home, visiting family.
We call it Hearth
loved
Week.
ones. Hearth Week?
Hearth Week. Because you're laying out the hearth you're setting up.
Well, it's not a week.
Hearth. That's true. Hearth. Something to do with hearth.
Hearth home.
Hearth home. That's good. Just one word. Hearth home.
Something.
Yeah. No, hearth home is good. I like that.
Hearthsgiving.
Hearth home is really good. No, like,
Yeah.
and it's that is perhaps that's something that sounds really dwarven. That's something that the dwarves implemented when they started doing like the month stuff. Like at the end of that 12th month, they started doing hearth home, and it just fit perfectly to a 10-day that the humans implemented. And they're like, okay, yeah, this 10-day holiday is hearth home, adopted from the dwarves, and it's this really like very much like come back to us. Super
I love it.
festive. I love that. That's such a good holiday.
Such a good holiday, and it's basically Christmas.
Which is a fun one for a lot of us.
But it could be everything. It doesn't have to be like
Yeah.
Yulemas or Christmas. It can just be like any sort of end of the year holiday.
Yeah.
And then it ends with New Year's. Like the last day is their New Year celebration.
Well, and the way I tend to do things is like, because Christmas, like, or you know, so on and so forth. That's specifically.
It's Christian.
Yeah. So like you can take elements of that, but I like to focus more on like warmth, hearth, good food. Like those are things that people tend to celebrate no matter where they are in the middle of winter, right?
Yeah. There's a great video I watched recently on YouTube by Monarch's Factory. I don't know if you know them.
Yeah.
There was a very good video about like creating homebrew celebrations in your world and why people celebrate the things they celebrate when they celebrate them. So like why, you know, in spring we celebrate returning to life, things, you know, coming back to life and all that stuff, like Easter.
It's surprisingly secular when you start to break it down. It's not as religious as people make it.
And how every culture's almost identically celebrates the same shit, even though no one spoke to each other back then.
Yeah. And it's
They just carried those traditions forward.
Yeah. And then they start to intermingle eventually, but
yeah,
it's so you can, I very much like again, hearth home being very much focused on things that would be important to people in the darkest hours of the year. That's cool.
Yes.
So
and then the last,
how many holidays do we want to have?
How many holidays do we want to have? I mean,
4 or 5.
We don't have to come up with infinite amounts of holidays,
just
because some of them are going to be region specific. Like, oh, this area of the world celebrates, you know, Savior's Day when, you know, whatever the fuck happened.
When the dwarves freed themselves from the tyranny of the elves, or when the tieflings broke the soul gate, right? Like,
yes, basically, yeah. There's going to be different holidays depending on region.
That makes sense.
Globally, though, they're going to celebrate the same thing, since, you know, there's the same sort of regional effects everywhere with our season.
So very much we could just establish like 3 or 4 seasonal holidays. Like hearth home is one for sure.
Yeah.
Do we want a counterpoint at the summer, like a farewell or a safe journey sort of holiday in the summer?
Like fair passing?
Yeah, like the sun is about to leave and they want to wish it farewell.
So it's because it's so close, it's about to start leaving, so they're wishing it
summer
goodbye.
apex, like right in the middle of summer, is when that transition begins and it begins to leave, and so they say. And I like the name Fair Passing, really.
Fair passing?
Yeah. So Fair Passing is all about.
Fair passing is like a singular day, like on the zenith of
the very
summer, but it's like you celebrate for 24 hours straight. It's just like let's make today all about the sun.
And it's very much about like dancing and festival and big bright colors and like flower wreaths and saying like, here are all the things that you're leaving behind, and you know,
reminder to come back to.
Yeah, come back to us.
I love it.
That's really good. So we've got Hearth Home and Fair Passing. Those are 2 fantastic holidays, very tied into the world and the lore. Do we want another one? Seasonal holiday?
I think like the two other cornerstones for like
Harvest, planting,
harvest, and then when things start to
thaw,
yeah,
life.
like first thaw, and then
First thaw is good.
and then I mean I don't want to call it mid reaping, but
I mean that it's. I know it's been used before.
the reap harvest or the harvest, something reap. Last reap?
Last reap. Last reap could be off kilter, where it's a little later in the fall as it truly heads into winter.
Yeah, because it's like these are the crops that can last a little bit into the cold, but this is the last reaping.
Yeah. Last reap.
And it's sort of got a little spooky connotation to it.
Yeah, there's a little bit of...
Can be a little spooky if you needed it to be, but
Things are starting to get dark.
Yeah.
It's a little spoopy.
This is the last food we're going to be able to make for the year, so things get a little...
You know. Ooh.
Yeah.
And then the first thaw
like
is right when the sun is... I think like
beginning
to come. Well, it's on its way back, and the cold temperatures are beginning to subside.
So
Because first thaw would be halfway back. Last reap would be halfway out.
Halfway away. Yeah, I think that the spring harvest, the first thaw, that it's almost like a celebration of a successful hearth home. You know what I mean? Like, oh, we did get to call it back.
We did.
Things are looking up now that the sun is on its way back.
That's cool. It's almost like a current events thing where it's like, okay, we weren't terrible and we successfully.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like we're celebrating this. It's not so much like I think the spring elements filter into like the imagery there because of like, but it is very much like, yes, we did it.
We did it.
We're not terrible. We don't have to hate ourselves.
I really like the idea that
it's a victory
between the end of Hearthhome to the first thaw, like that whole section is seen as like not 100% part of the year, right? And then first thaw is like their new year, like the new year is officially here because the sun decided to return.
Yes, I think that's great. I think the year starts and ends in first thaw, and I feel like there's a lot of
time between. Isn't really
that's seasonal depression.
Yes, pretty much. Yeah. That's 100% true.
Yeah, that's seasonal depression.
So you're kind of just waiting to see if like the sun decided to come back this time.
Yeah,
and it's sort of just in that limbo of like, well, hope we did good.
I hope it was a good enough celebration. Hope we didn't muck up too much this year. I love that. That's really good. Yeah,
and that's where like the New Year's resolutions will come in, like I'm gonna be better so that the sun comes back. I'm gonna be nicer to people so the sun has.
Or it's more like, okay, we know the sun is coming. So now I can set resolutions for the year. We're guaranteed, like it's on its way back. Something like that,
yeah.
So it's like, okay, it's worth renewing vows where the world isn't ending.
I can, look forward to stuff and change myself because the sun decided to return to us. Yes. It's gifted us with another year.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
That's so good. Oh my God. This is a fantastic calendar.
I want to celebrate these. Can we celebrate these in real life?
Let's just do it. Let's just have in Twee or something like a freaking hearth home celebration.
That'd be pretty funny.
Ugh. Wow, I think we did it. Is there anything else we want to add?
I don't think so. I think this is actually the calendar I would use in my home games.
Yeah, me too. I might dump this and we should like do a little quick write up thing and go from there.
But I knew you already have one set up for Conundrum Company.
But it's just an altered Greyhawk calendar.
I mean, you can throw it out and use the cool one.
Oh, it's too late now. Clearly. But for the Emergence and for all of those worlds that I've got, like this would be really fitting for it.
This is a good one.
This is solid. What do we call this calendar? That's what we haven't done. We haven't named it.
We haven't named the calendar?
Yeah, a lot of the time I don't remember
wait.
Yeah, I don't remember the name of like most calendars, but they usually have a name.
The Gregorian calendar is what we use, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. The Neolithic calendar. Is that a thing? What does that mean?
The Neolithic is a time period in our planet's history. But if we implied that the Neolithic existed, like
the Platonic calendar. We're just friends with it.
We're just buddies. I mean, so what if it is at so like the elves called their calendar the founding, and the dwarves called,
I think they would just like say it's the cycle. This
or
is
the cycle. Okay.
This
So
is what
maybe
it
the
is.
dwarves called theirs the founding because they began to found
Yeah.
a sort of measure. And then the humans could kind of adapted the founding calendar into the,
Like a Is there a person
a person
that
that did
did
it. Yeah.
Is there like a person who worked all this out and is like, this is the new calendar? And then people started to adopt that because it made a lot of sense.
What's a good fantasy human name to put on this?
Thaddeus.
The Fadian Calendar?
Yes. I love it.
The Fadian Calendar. So Thaddeus was the human who altered the founding calendar into the Fadian calendar. We now have the Fadian calendar. Boom.
Very good.
We've named it. The Fadian calendar has 4 seasons. Each season has 3 months. Each month has 3 weeks, and each week has 10 days. There are 4 primary holidays: Hearth Home at the zenith of winter, Fair Passing in the zenith of spring, First Thaw in the zenith of spring, Fair Passing in the zenith of summer, and Last Reap in the zenith of fall.
Yes.
That's perfect. That's beautiful. That's
all
wonderful.
beautiful.
That's so good.
Lock it in, tie it in,
Little bow, ribbon, ship it off to the people.
send it off for Hearth Home.
You get a Hearth Home present. It's a calendar. So, Sean, do you know what time it is?
It's time for Here's the Mail. It never fails. It makes me wanna grab the mail.
It's mail time.
Yes.
I have a question for us then. I have a good question for us.
Nice.
By our friend Carl. And Carl asks...
Carl?
Yeah, Carl emailed us at loredumpquestions@gmail.com. And it's a good question. It's a really complicated question. So we're gonna break it down and see how it goes. But I'm gonna read out at least the first kind of sentence and a bit here. So, what DM tips do you have for when a campaign ends prematurely? It happens far too often. 10 plus sessions and someone's schedule changes and you can never get the game lined up again, or relationships among players become strained, or players just lose interest. Whatever the reason, you find yourself with a fantastic world you've built and a half-finished narrative. I imagine this will be different for each individual, but assuming you don't want to leave the world you've invested in behind as life moves on, how do you approach this? And then he offers up some sort of like theories, but I think, you know, how do you handle this? The main question here is, what DM tips do you have for when a campaign is ending or has ended prematurely? You know, and we could talk about like repurposing that campaign, or we could talk about problem solving and solution oriented, bringing the group back together. There's a lot of ways to approach this question. It's a big one.
I mean, you already hit the biggest nail on the head right there, what you just said right there at the end. Mm-hmm. That no matter what happens, either the group comes back together, or you find a new group, or parts of the group come back together and you find new people. But regardless, you can repurpose all of that good stuff you saved. That all goes right back into the next campaign, or you reskin it, and, you know.
Yeah.
Or you find a whole new group, run through the whole campaign again, if you want to. That's up to you.
It's really up to you, because your players likely, if you're sitting down if the group's fallen apart and you ended halfway through your campaign, then likely your new group of players are not going to be the same people. Obviously, if they are, it's a different answer to this question. But if they're not the same people, they've never done it, and you have been able to fine tune it. It could be that it's boring to you as a DM, and if that's the case, you want to build something new. But it could also be that you have a perfect campaign and an awesome story that you now get to play through with somebody else, right?
Yeah.
You could use it that way. Like, that's repurposing. Or you can also do, if you don't want to break the sanctity of what those characters did in that world, whether you're playing with the same group or a different group, you just say, well, whatever they successfully accomplished is canon, and alter the narrative accordingly. And the new group leads off from there. You know, they hear of this group of adventurers who started this job and got killed off halfway through it, or fell apart through the bard sleeping with the rogue who was married to the fighter. Like, whatever it is, you can do that and then continue the narrative from there. And then you're still honoring your old party, right? It really depends on how you feel about how it all ended.
Yeah.
In regards to recycling.
Recycling specifically, because a lot of the further you get into the campaign, the more specifically tailored everything is to the individual party members and their stories and their ongoing struggles. But there's always going to be aspects of that you have to plan, that you can just say, okay, well, this can be slightly altered and redescribed, and it's a completely different thing now. And I can save that for, another campaign I run down the road.
Yeah.
Or you have a cool monster you created. That's always good to just put in the back burner, save for another day. In terms of salvaging the campaign, that is a much more difficult thing to try and do.
I will say, a lot of the time, in my experience, Sean, and I'd be curious about your thoughts here, a party will fall apart in the first 2 weeks, or at the 10-week mark, or at the 20-week mark. Like, there tends to be ebb and flows of that. Like, and each time resolving those differences is also different. Like, at the 1 to 2 week fall apart, it's just the people were never really that interested in the narrative, or have gotten a taste of the table and it doesn't match their play style, and they know they want to go somewhere else, right? Like, that's those early fall aparts tend to be that, right? The people come in and are like, well, you know what, this isn't going to work for me. And you haven't invested that much yet. You can completely repurpose like it's barely started, or you can continue with the people who want to play and plug the holes with new players. Right? The 10-week to 20-week fall aparts, those tend to be more related to emotion, where somebody feels like they're being treated a certain way, or are not discovering what they want to discover, or aren't enjoying the way the story's going, or they've been treated a certain way by another person at the table for too long, and now that's finally beginning to surface. They've sat on it too long, and that is a different fall apart to the 2-week fall apart.
Yeah. There's also, things can just fall apart at any point, really.
There is that
for 3 or 4 years, and then it's just like, oh well, this is no longer what I'm looking for, or these people aren't the people I thought they were. Like, 4 years into a campaign can still have that sort of friendships fall apart like that.
People change. Time changes.
Time changes people. People change time, like we just did.
COVID happened, and
fucking COVID happened.
Gained campaigns, but I also lost campaigns through COVID. Just because
there are people who entered relationships before COVID, were in relationships during COVID, and have fallen out of relationships during COVID, and marriages that have fallen apart due to COVID. Like, things drastically change all relationships, and as fun and as free-flowing as people like to think the D&D table is, it's a very delicate balance to find. Think of how hard it is to find a good group to play D&D with.
Yeah.
I've played a bunch of games. I can name probably 3 groups that I was like, this is a good group. I hope we all play together forever.
And that could change 2 years from now as well. Those groups that you want to, like, I think the real answer to this question is a dungeon master specifically. And I reference the sacred obligation of a dungeon master, and a lot of the time people think I'm talking about, like, this is a sacred role that you're taking on, it's very important. That's not it. The sacred obligation of a dungeon master is to understand and know his players and help perpetuate respect across that table so that everybody can have a good time, and dial in and out as is needed. And that isn't to say that that's entirely on the dungeon master. Players are responsible for their actions and behaviors, but a lot of the time what the dungeon master has to do is help navigate that.
Yes. And there is also, I would say, another obligation that it's a less sacred one. We'll call it the demonic obligation. Where if they realize that the campaign is not in the best interest of everybody, like there's no reason it should keep going, they have the power and the authority to say, I will not be running this game anymore because it is being mishandled or people are being mistreated, and I won't allow that at my table. Or, you can't just push through the story because you want to get through your story. You have an obligation to your players to make sure they're having fun before your story even comes into the picture.
Absolutely, 100%. And you have to be ready to have an uncomfortable conversation with someone. You really do. Respectfully with them. But you, either as a table or one-to-one, may have to sit down with a person and say, because what almost all D&D tables do is they just let it go until it explodes and everyone hates each other. That's not how you handle it. They seethe until everyone, somebody just stops coming because they're so miserable, or somebody yells at somebody, or somebody kills another person's player character. We've all done it. It's hard to have uncomfortable conversations. I literally can think of a million examples. John and I both can. But what you should do...
Josh always peeves me off, and I tell him right away.
He's like, Josh, you idiot. How dare you?
Yeah. Or I'll occasionally we'll play an off-stream, just random game, and I'll say, hey, Josh, why are you so mad? And you're like, I'm not mad. Shut up. I'm like, no.
Don't call me out.
Get over here. Get over here.
We'll have a conversation. Or again, we play on live streams, and I think a lot of people perceive those as all bells and whistles and everyone gets along perfectly, but a little pull the curtain behind, there is absolutely conflict and disagreement in every single one of those. Yeah. And
because we're all people,
and you have to navigate that, and it's really tricky, but it needs to be done. Just try to respect everybody involved in that process when you do.
Now, there's another important part of this that needs to be said that hasn't been said yet. Every player at that table is responsible for this dynamic and this balance that's being upheld. Mm-hmm. It is the obligation of the DM to make sure it's being handled correctly, but it is every player at the table's responsibility to also maintain that equilibrium and that environment for the players. You can't just look at your DM and say, you fucking fix it.
Yeah.
Because it might not be his problem with another person. It might be your problem with another person that you're trying to get him to solve. Or her.
Most of the time, if the DM's the problem, that game's over in 3 or 4 sessions.
Yeah.
If
no one comes to the table.
Yeah. Because that person is in such a position of unfortunate power in a lot of ways that when they're abusive or problematic, it's so easy to be like, okay, no way. I don't want to be a part of that.
Yeah, 1000% now.
Yeah. But if it's another player, like player on player stuff, that's far more difficult. Because a lot of people would just like, well, it's not intentional, or it's, it's not a big deal, or I don't want to make a thing out of it. But that player in the meantime is stewing, and there is not a single person out there. And if somebody tells you this, it's a red flag. There's not a single person out there who does not self-insert themselves into their character in Dungeons & Dragons to some extent. I'm not saying that it doesn't...
I'm a red flag.
No, you're good. It's not to say that people can't differentiate, but people have value in their character and have sanctity in what their character would do and believe and how their character would act. And very often that comes into conflict unintentionally with other players, and that will upset people. So you hear a lot of people say, and this goes back to the old trope of the player who says, well, it's what my character would do, as an excuse to treat another character as crap. And then the onus is on the player of the character who's being treated like crap to deal with it. But that's not fair, because everybody does it. Everybody cares about their characters. If they don't, the character would likely be dead. There is importance in that. And so, building that culture. We really got on a tangent here, but building that culture is really important.
this is stuff that a lot of people don't think about when that table problem arises.
Yep.
Also, I will say this from experience and a lot of different problems arising at different tables. A lot of the times when you think, oh, it's just me, I have a problem with this one person and their behaviors, you ask anyone else at that table, they're like, yeah, I wasn't going to say anything. That guy fucking sucks. He's really annoying, and he's always just he always just goes off and does whatever he wants and makes the game not enjoyable for the rest of us. If you talk to other people and just say, hey, can I get a second opinion? a lot of the times you'll find out whether or not it's an immediate problem just by asking the person to your left and be like, hey, this guy sucks, right? And they're like, oh, I wasn't going to say anything, but yes,
And
that
100%.
guy sucks.
Like,
Yeah.
Sean is so freaking right on that one. There have been instances of that a billion times that I've experienced myself. But that isn't to say that if you do say, hey, does this person seem like they're being pretty gross to you? And the person to your left says, no, they're fine. Or, oh, that's just John. That doesn't make it acceptable either.
Yes,
Like,
yes. I'm saying
Sean's
ask
right.
everyone but that player.
Yeah. Well, no, but I'm saying, like, there can also be the rest of the table can also sometimes not recognize when a person is gross, or make excuses for them, which is,
that is true.
Similarly, like,
another problematic experience.
And that's
then the whole table's the problem, and you need to find a new table, not new players.
Like, when you've got the best example would be a player says something racist, and you go to the DM and you say, hey, he said that thing, is that appropriate? And the DM says, not really, but that's just Joe being Joe. That doesn't make it okay. Like, that's not acceptable.
You hear that, Joe?
Yeah, Joe.
You know you're racist.
We know.
Stop being racist,
We're coming
Joe.
for you.
Stop it.
Anyway, yeah. Wow.
No.
Great question, Carl. Any other thoughts, Sean?
Fantastic question. I don't know, a bunch of thoughts, but they're all just me yelling at people who are bad. Don't be bad at tables.
Don't be bad.
Don't go to a table unless you know what they're all comfortable to do with.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the RPG checklist.
Very good.
Do it. And even if they say yes, no sexual assault at the table.
Duh.
Even if they say yes, I'm still miles away from that topic.
Yeah. It's so... It's insane.
And if one of your players does it, throw them in jail. I mean in real life, not in like the game.
Yeah, no. They don't get to play anymore.
Yeah. They go to timeout on a different continent forever.
Yeah.
Or they die in the game, and then that they're just gone.
It is incredible the things that people try to do at the tabletop.
It's insane.
It's
the horror stories I've heard. It's just like people do that regularly.
It's like, what are you doing?
Your anime weeb boy isn't that cool. Stop trying to sexually assault people.
Yeah.
That's the moral of today's episode.
That's what the title is.
Your anime weeb boy isn't that cool.
Oh my god, what a good... That was a really good lore dump, Sean. We dumped so much lore.
That was a really good dump. I feel lighter after that dump.
Oh my god. All right, anything... that means I think we're done. I have no segue on this. We've answered questions. Hey, one more time, Sean. If they have questions for us, where do they send those?
Well, you're going to want to write your congressman, and you're going to want to ask them that on November, 2nd, to vote. Everyone out there, you got to vote. Voting is important for some reason, but you should do it. Also, you could email us at lordomquestions@gmail.com, or you can send a question to Instagram and Twitter, and we'll be sure to pluck it out, put it on the show, give you our best take on the answer. And yeah, Josh, you want to talk about politics?
So you have told me to email lore dump questions to my congressman and mail D&D questions to lore dump. Got it. Done. We're good.
Yes. Or you could send an episode of this podcast to your congressman, just like as a free advertisement to us. We'd really appreciate it. Get the word out there. But I think other than that, we're all good, right?
Yeah, let's play ourselves out. Boop-a-doop boop, boop-a-doop boop, boop-a-doop boop, boop-a-doop. I'm losing the song.
Chicken egg, elves, rich dwarves. And slowly
You're just gonna keep going?
fading
Just
out
keep going.
because I can edit.
No, just keep going.
The song's over. I've ended it.
No, just keep going.
Josh.
Keep going.
Post-credits scene. Thanos emerges from the mist with a glove, and he punches Thor, and he says, "Take that, you fucking Aussie bitch." And he says, "Hey, I'm from space. That's racist."
What?
Fade to black. That was our post-credit Marvel scene.
I'm gonna stop.
I love Australia.
Australia is great. Australia, 10 out of 10. If we're still recording,
I cut that out.
Oh,
Josh,
cool.
they didn't hear that. Josh,
You're
Josh
just.
said
It's just gonna be me saying
Josh,
Australia.
why are you so mean to Australia?
You suck.